Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I'm not sure how many people know of the movie Bulletproof Monk. Now, this was a film that didn't do too well. Well, not surprising, because people are such morons. A matter of fact, it got trashed critically and did fairly poor in the box office. It cost what was it here? It cost 52 million to make and only made 23 million, or actually it made 37 million worldwide. So it didn't even make its budget back. But, I'm always shocked at the fact of how many people are into martial arts and how much general interest there is, yet how little media there is out there. There's no television series except Karate Kid, which really isn't very Asiatic or philosophical. It's more of a soap opera for white suburbia. There was a series that came out that had like 7 episodes, which was a little mystical, and I don't remember the name, but it only made it for 1 season. It was a great series, but here again, nobody cared, and nobody really cares about anymore. There's been several martial arts series on TV, and none of them really made it. Kung Fu made it 3 years. Martial Law made it 3 years as well. These weren't big hits, and other than Kung Fu, who did kind of well, from what I understand, the ratings were pretty bad at the end of the 3rd year, or they were dropping. And of course, this was the reason why Martial Law was actually with Sammo Hung was canceled. A great show, fun, set in modern times, police, great fight scenes, and it had Arsenio Hall in it to give it a little more action and comedy. I just thought it was a great series. I have it on DVD, and everyone should get that. And of course, Kung Fu was very much a product of its time, set in the Old West and very philosophical. It's amazing that made it whatsoever. But really nothing followed that. With the success of Kung Fu, what came after that? Well, there was a show called The Master with Lee Van Cleef. Flush! Bun, 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 gun, 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 gun. So that didn't make it. I'm sure I'm missing several series. There was one of my favorite was Black Sash. This was kind of a soap opera set in a karate school, which I thought was excellent. Still had your fighting, still had the martial arts, and it was interesting because it had interesting people's lives. I don't think it made it past 6 episodes. Again, I got this on DVD from one of these sources. You can't find this stuff. A great series. Didn't make it. Bruce Lee, people think, was this fantastic worldwide sensation. Well, he was big in Hong Kong, where martial artists, like cowboys and knights in the West, were looked upon as heroes. Really, none of those films made it to the United States, or the ones that did never really made much money. These are international hits out of Asia and other places who liked this kind of style. And of course, they've been making kung fu movies in China since there's been cameras. So that really doesn't count in terms of the world interest, and certainly the Western world. We even go into this today. I mean, martial arts movies were kind of big in the 80s and 90s, but not really. People talk about the ninja movies. Well, I'm trying to remember how many there were with Shokanagi, but the whole idea is that I think there were 3. And these were low budget, made by Canon Films, and they were very well done and fun. Everybody loves them. They didn't make any money. There were films that followed that. Chuck Norris started coming on the scene, and he filmed low budget films, most of them fairly bad. But hey, they had some good fight scenes in it. But this is the same old story. None of them really produced any large values. None of Chuck Norris's movies, which Force Vengeance, one of my favorite, has a great photography scene there, lit from the back and kind of shadows against a white background. Really cool. And all of his movies were good. They were very simplistic, basically revenge movies. You killed my wife, I'll kill you, type of things. But, I mean, that's how most martial arts are. And Chuck Norris films were basically all good. Lone Wolf McQuade, a fun Western. But those all petered out. He went into TV and did the McQuaid TV series because he couldn't make movies anymore. Nobody went to those movies. Cannons went down. Von Damme made a lot of cheap movies for Cannon and is really the only guy who's kind of keeps making movies. There were a few big movies again. Seagal made a couple of big ones that made him famous, but those movies are a flash in the pan. Nothing has happened. Now, Seagal did have an actual TV dramatic series as well as a short reality show where he played a little sheriff somewhere in the South. But he did have another show for 2 or 3 years, but none of these were any big, and it was a syndication type show. Nothing's really got on network TV since Kung Fu. Of course, Kung Fu is followed by Kung Fu, what is it? The Next Level or whatever, I can't think of it right now. Really a great TV show that lasted, I think, for 4 years in syndication. And the reason why some of these things made it was the fact that there was syndication at that time and people were picking up these kind of shows. So it's a real fun show, very mystical. David Carradine's follow-up to that series with his son who's a cop and he's the grandson of Cain. Really a fantastic show with lots of mysticism and also a lot of magic stuff was added in. Kung Fu, the original series, was very philosophical, but as far as I'm concerned, didn't have enough magic in it. So it was just lucky that people caught on to it and found the actual philosophy behind it interesting. Not that you'll find any Asians, because shortly after that show, I went to all the karate schools and kung fu schools in Los Angeles, and they looked at me like my head was on fire. What? Well, you learned that after you studied 10 years. Yeah, they didn't know nothing with their fat bellies hanging out in their pseudo systems. So the whole idea is that there's this great interest, and I'm amazed how many people have learned martial arts. I'm assuming martial arts schools are fairly crowded now, and I'm not sure who's doing it or not. I mean, I've seen people as strange as anyone who knows my channel knows Sean Carroll, the theoretical physicist, and his wife has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, apparently, or some karate. Well, that's weird. Lex, what's his name? Lex Feldman or something like that. He was this intellectual physicist who's big on YouTube. Has a black belt as well. And everybody I talk to seems to have taken classes and knows some sort of martial arts. You'd be quite surprised. I forget his name, Kevin from the King of Queens comedy show, the star of that show. Well, he's got a black belt. It goes on and on. Of course, it makes a lot of sense. If you're a successful person in the public or in general, if you want to have basic confidence, knowing how to take care of yourself is important. I mean, really, isn't that what life is all about? The minute you get outside of your house, you're confronted with physical attacks, whether it's in the neighborhood, the front yard, or in school. That's what you have to deal with from day one. So times haven't changed. We are cavemen of the worst varieties. Secondly, if you're a popular person, having that skill certainly is good to handle yourself in potentially dangerous situations. It's difficult to carry weapons with you, particularly guns and other things, even though this now has become popular. Bruce Lee carried guns because they are so effective and easy to use and liked guns. He wasn't going to be beaten, and certainly being a celebrity, it looked pretty silly if 3 guys came up to you and beat you up, which probably would happen no matter what your skills. But you pull a little gun on them, and, it's called the Great Equalizer for a reason. The Peacemaker, the Equalizer, that's what the single-action cult was called. So it makes sense, and of course carrying weapons now has been something people are easily able to do in most states in the United States, where some states you can wear a gun on your hip, which I'm fully in agreement with. But we have to keep in mind that this is a reality that is only American, and even that is difficult to walk around like that. A lot of people won't want to do this. They may be afraid. They have kids, etc. So having guns, you have to be very skilled as well. Gun handling is an advanced martial art, and you got to know what you're doing so that it works for you and you hit your target instead of shooting yourself or somebody else. So guns in themselves are something that I have been involved with for many, many years and pretty much an expert in. But you have to know what you're doing, particularly pistol combat shooting. So a lot of people, of course, don't want to do that. Maybe they don't want to use deadly force. You pull a gun, somebody's going to die, or at least they better, or you're in bigger trouble. So the whole idea is that dead men tell no tales. This is why police shoot somebody 50 times to make sure they're dead, because there's no witness for the other side. So the whole idea is this has to be fully understood. So it's amazing how much is out there. Now, we certainly see guns everywhere. John Wick is one of these new movies out. There certainly are great gun films. And there obviously is some fisticuffsy going on. But I'm just amazed how much martial arts is out there. Yet there's virtually nothing on the screen or on the little screen or the big screen. At a time when there's huge amounts of productions going on from Netflix and Amazon and all the other people, because there's hours and hours to fill up, and you would think that martial arts would be something people would be into because this is cheap to film. Yes, it takes time to film good fight scenes, but this can be done by an action director pretty well now, and it doesn't take too long. Certainly it's a lot cheaper than getting cars and running them together, or even getting machine guns and having them shooting all the time. No, nothing, nowhere. Where are the movies out there? Now, as I said, Van Damme usually comes out with 1 or 2 movies a year, but, there are more cop movies now. There's action in it, there's martial arts to some degree, but these aren't your classic fighting things. Where are the ninja movies? Now, Shokanagi has a son, and he is still fit as a fiddle. So nothing. Nobody cares. Canon is down the tubes. There's some talk that Canon Productions will come back. I don't know if they'll do those kind of films. You would think these would be prime films for the new reality in the film kingdom, which is make stuff inexpensively. That's interesting, and that's what most fight films are about, are action films. But action films can be very expensive and very dangerous. It's not that difficult to do martial arts, and a lot of it hasn't been explored. There's all sorts of martial arts that people have never seen, different styles, etc. And this could be a whole series out there. And Carlton Cuse was big into this, trying to get these kind of shows going, and tried to get 3 or 4 of these going. They all failed. Now he's doing other silly stuff. What a waste for a guy who has interest in this and knows what he's doing. One of the big things that again died, which was a fantastic martial arts, action, fun, and philosophical movie. And philosophical movies people like for some reason. I'm kind of a little bit surprised. But what's funny about this movie is that it wasn't philosophical enough. It was just a little quotey thing. It had a very cute question that the Tibetan master, played by Chow Yun-fat, again, at least it had an Asian here, very famous Asian, very famous Chinese. I think he's the #1 Chinese actor in China, against Sean William Scott, who's known from the Pie movies, but, did a very good job, got fit, looked good doing this and everything else. I don't think he was a bad choice. Maybe someone else could have been a little more macho, but he wasn't supposed to be macho. He was supposed to be a street guy. It's a great story. Now, Bulletproof Monk, there was a comic book of the same name, but it was only a few issues, and basically they just took the name because they liked it, paid the guy. It has nothing to do with the comic books, which really went nowhere. From what I understand, a few comic books were made based on the movie, but the movie flopped. It also was produced by John Woo. Have you heard of him? Well, he's the famous Chinese producer that did all the scenes, and you certainly can see it here. This picture is done top quality. Everything about it is top quality. There's all sorts of Easter eggs. There's philosophy in there that you don't have to be, advanced Bruce Lee kind of guy to figure out. So the whole idea is all this is there. So top people are Terrence Chang, another top Hong Kong guy, was brought in to do. I mean, he did everything possible to make a cool martial arts movie, and everybody pooed on it. It was directed by Paul Hunter, who was relatively new at the time, but he did a fantastic job. Now, the actual DVD with this, and they have a Blu-ray now, has 2 commentary tracks that talk about this. Hunter talks about his experiences and all the Easter eggs he put in, the 2 authors that wrote the screenplay. Fantastic insights into the whole film and some of the background. This is what I love. I love to see a good film, but what are the details? I like to feel like I've been there with the people that are important, that I was kind of in the production staff. But of course, I'm a person who seeks high levels of understanding and gnosis. Most people, they're punching you. So the whole idea is that a great cast here, including Victoria Schnurrfit, who did an excellent job with martial arts, who's a very attractive girl, and Jamie King and other people they brought in to play some bad guys, etc. So the whole cast was excellent, and had this overtone of showing ancient Tibet in 1943 and the Nazis and this whole mystical story behind it, which I'm not going to ruin for you. Go watch this film, buy this film, get the poster, read the book, get the soundtrack. This is awesome stuff that doesn't come along, and it's been pooed on. So it's a great, great movie, and I usually watch it at least once a month. It's just good film that never seems to tire watching it, and it has excellent fight scenes, good-looking babes. What more do you want? So, and great mysticism, well done. This wasn't made for, $10 million like a Chuck Norris film is, which basically means he got new jeans to kick people in the face with. So the whole idea is that this is a great good budget film. $50 million at that particular time. When was this made? Was made around 2000, released in 2003, so $50 million was a decent budget back then, and they used it well. And again, it gets into the philosophy, but people, that wasn't enough. There wasn't enough, crybaby. We should have been reading the ancient Tibetan text. And of course, they would have done that. They would have said how terrible this is. So it's too philosophical. I want to see the punching. So the whole idea is that there is a running question out through the film is, why do hot dogs come in packages of 10 and buns in packages of 6 or something, however they come? And there was a philosophical meaning about this. He was trying to teach the Western character played by Sean what is important in life and what goes on, and trying to keep him on the straight and narrow, because he was becoming a pickpocket, a little hoodlum to survive. He was homeless, he didn't make any money, and he would go out on the streets and pickpocket and do other things, which he was very good at. And then he would work in this Chinese movie theater where he actually would they would show kung fu films, and he would then mimic the kung fu films and actually taught himself kung fu from the films. What a great concept. Too intellectual for me, though. So the whole idea is this is just a wonderful film, well written by the 2 writers, Zoris and Ethan Reif, and Cyrus Vorish. Of course, I butchered their names, but the whole idea is that these were fantastic film, good stories, lots of action, well produced. It's really sad that this didn't make it. I'm sure there are other ones out there as well. I've talked about the classics out there. The Circle of Iron, of course, which was the movie, the Zenith movie, supposedly written by Bruce Lee, and so forth. An excellent philosophical movie, one of the best out there as well. And there's, of course, the old Matrix, which talks about the bigger picture of life. But the problem with the Matrix, it's a little bit too science fiction-y. It's hard to get into it with that. But it's so impressive with the graphics of it being modeled after Japanese anime that it's just super impressive because it was so well done. And there's going to be a Matrix 4 coming out sometime this year, I believe. So this is all pretty exciting information to come. But as I said, with all the interest in martial arts, with everybody taking it, all these classical films, it's really sad that we aren't making more ninja films. Why isn't there a ninja series? None of those have actually made it anyhow. Now there are ninja series or samurai series on in Japan that have been on for many years, and they've had series run different things. Some really fun stuff that I saw in the late 70s when I visited over there on TV. Typically Japanese in nature, but a lot of fun and very interesting. But there are no series anywhere. And certainly nothing is coming from Asia to be brought into any of these markets, yet there's tons of money to do that. Netflix, Amazon, who's now bought MGM, all of these things are places where we can finance these type of things. But apparently none of these people have much interest in it. And when they do produce something, there isn't much of a scream about it. Even though there has been a scream about The Karate Kid, which is doing very well. I think it's going into its 4th season now. Great fight scenes, well written, another good. But that's it out there, people. There's nothing else that I'm familiar with. I haven't seen anything listed or talked about. And certainly there isn't very many martial arts movies. You get occasional low-budget action films coming out. I guess, well, who's new now? Scott Adkins, who's apparently a competent martial artist. He's never been a tournament person, but he certainly seems to know his martial arts. And of course, you're still getting Van Damme, who's gone into drama and other things, and even had a TV series, but it really wasn't a martial arts TV series. Again, it's an action show with guns and kicking. That's not martial arts to me. There hasn't been a revamping of Kung Fu in general. Now, it may be difficult to redo the original movie, but something similar to that certainly could be done out there. And there's certainly enough people out there to do it. Secondly, the Asian market is huge. China's got 1.5 billion people. Wouldn't they be interested, even if it's not necessarily made there? But certainly Netflix has things made all over the world that would be interested in this area. Nada, 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 nada. Same old story, same old nonsense. So here was a chance to do something and it flopped. This should be something that is tried again. This would be a great TV series in general. And certainly that crap that's being produced out there that they put on TV now, on Netflix and other places, is horrendous. And what's even funny is that the #1 series on Netflix and other stations, which is interesting, even on NBC is coming out and so many other, the #1 interested series on Netflix will blow your mind. It is Friends, a 20-year-old series. Friends and The Office are the #1 viewed shows. So people are watching the same shows over and over and over again because they are, like most older shows, and I tend to do the same thing now, tend to be better than the new stuff for whatever reason. And they're not really putting out good new stuff to any great degree. But of course, these are situation comedies, and there are some decent ones out there. But these were classics, and I think they're classics for a reason. Why these ever ended, why they're not picked up again, why isn't there a new Friends type show, why isn't there a new Office show, I have no idea. These are giant money makers, and they continue to pull in literally billions of dollars a year in viewing finances. It's unbelievable. Yet nothing is there. Yet none of these are brought back again. There must be people trying to get martial arts things going, yet none of these people are in any way being supported or getting it out there. You would think with the success of The Karate Kid that this would spur other series dealing with martial arts. None. So it's really sad, and certainly there's enough, I believe there was the Marvel they had on for a while based on the comic book, and apparently they messed that up. I don't know what that was about, but here again, some bozo put some white guy in the role of the Kung Fu master. I only watched a couple of episodes. I couldn't find it where I live to watch consistently, but that apparently went off the air as well based on the Marvel comic. Why? I mean, there's a lot of good information there. So we keep doing all these things. There absolutely seems no interest in these things. I don't know how many issues of Black Belts and all these other magazines sell, or martial arts books in general, or what's going on in the bigger picture there, but they're definitely particularly in the manifesting occult sciences, there's always been a big interest in martial arts and the mysticism connected with it. Martial arts has always had a mysticism with it. Chi, the projection of punching without punching, mind control, the ninjutsus of using power and magic, and of course, magic was a big part of ancient martial arts, from the ninjas to the samurais, etc. And they had their own little priesthood that used to do spells and other things to protect the samurais, and samurais did them themselves. There's whole systems of samurai magic, which IJOS publishes. We also have the only fighting magic book on the market, which shows you how to use psychic techniques in battle, as well as a psychic warfare book. So they're out there in terms of, and these have been published for many years now, that you can learn how to do higher level combats. And none of this seems to be applied anywhere. Why aren't they showing, why aren't there shows about strong psychic people in general? People who use chi and other things, who use psychic powers, who remote view. All of this has been swept under the carpet and ignored. And we have to wonder why. I mean, Hollywood claims it's so metaphysical, dude. Let's smoke a doobie and talk about life. It ain't none of that. Let's smoke a doobie and get cocaine and screw around. I don't see much coming from Hollywood. You have the pseudo New Agers like Shirley MacLaine, who just don't seem to do much of anything. She went on a personal journey, made a lot of money from it, and it died there. It was packaged, wrapped, and thrown in the bin. So the whole idea is that what happened from that? Why aren't there mystical shows out there, period? Now, we had 2 mediumship shows for a while, and that's interesting as well, but at least that was something. And of course, there are the ghost hunter shows. Those don't really count. They're just garbage, most of them. There's only one that has any validity, and that's Overdone. But there is no psychic shows out there. People doing psychic stuff actually. And I'm not talking about psychic reading shows, which seem to be out there, which has got to be as boring. Oh, yeah, they told Bill Alexander that his grandmother is still alive in the afterlife. Yeah, that's interesting. Doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm not overly care what happens to Bill Sanders or whatever relatives. So it doesn't mean anything to me. So what we have to do is look into and have characters with this plethora of channels and hours that need to be full. No psychic stuff. No people doing remote viewing. No people using psychic power, telekinesis, or other things. It just amazes me. And this really didn't even happen in Star Wars, which is a great farce. They talk about the Jedi mind tricks, but the amount of philosophical information in Star Wars, the amount of time that Yoda talked about anything and trained Luke was minuscule. I mean, he left his training. We didn't even really get into it. It was really nothing. So there really is very little in there. And, George Lucas was a gearhead. He wasn't really anything special in these areas. So he did that because it was based on old soap operas or serials, I should say, from the 40s, which had a lot of this kind of interesting stuff thrown into it. And there was a lot of mysticism there and psychic. The Shadow was a psychic character. Now, I don't know how many people have heard of the Shadow. One of the most popular characters in history, was on radio for 50 years. Books were written about him. A few movies. This guy was a psychic person. He clouded your mind so you couldn't see him. He detected things. He knew what was happening. We don't even have a character like that anymore. There's no metaphysical characters whatsoever. And I have to wonder what's going on here. From Hollywood, who claims they're so hippy-dippy, they're really not hippy-dippy. And California's never been hippy-dippy. It's been sex and drugs thrown around. Leave me alone, dude. I went into freedom. Freedom to get loaded and have a lot of sex. So, I mean, this really is about. Hollywood has really not produced any kind of mystical series or films to any great extent. Yes, there's been a few. But, compared to everything else, there's very few. And here we're going into a whole new time where all this is opened up and all the comic books are out there. But any comic book characters that are more psychically based or even psychic feats are totally and completely ignored. There's nothing about them. Why don't we have a series with people that are psychically empowered? We've had mostly copies of X-Men type people. Let's get into really what's happening. Let's get into the fact of people who are psychics. Now, Star Wars: The Next Generation, at least we had one character there, the female officer there, or whatever she was, who was a sensitive. So at least that was something, but I don't think that part was big enough either. I don't, people work on this psychic level all the time and they never admit it. And one of the reasons they don't admit it is because it's socially unacceptable. It was not like that in the late 60s and 70s when you could buy a psychic ESP game right in your local store, and they sold millions of them. They were in the Sears catalog. All of this was there, and there were millions of these games made and sold, and I don't know how many hundreds of varieties there were, but there were all sorts of ESP cards and other things when it was popular, and it was the thing to do. Matter of fact, it was thought of this would save the world. That's what a lot of people from the 60s thought. Well, certainly sex, drugs, and rock and roll ain't going to do much of anything and never have any variations of that. Certainly alcohol didn't build anything, and certainly sex has done absolutely nothing for mankind except ruin most of everything. So the point is that growing to a higher state of consciousness and being a more independently psychic-based person has been thrown in the bin. Pooped on, peed on, and thrown in the trash can when it is the answer. And why did that happen? Well, we have all the 60 sellouts. These are all the people that are 70 years old and above who did virtually nothing, and the problems we have today are pretty much they're in control. So the whole idea is did absolutely nothing. But why is that? Why does this not be something? Well, nobody wants to have an empowered person. They want you to be subject to the control of the company, the government, the masses. So this turned into, because people were still seeking higher levels of empowerment, to singularity. Now, you don't hear much about that anymore because it's a farce, just like AI and everything else. You can't make a computer anywhere close to a human brain. It doesn't matter how much information you pump through a computer. It'll never be close to a human brain. Putting some device in you, the whole bionic thing, which started, probably goes back to the 20s and 30s and was popular in the 70s with the $6 million man, is a fantasy. You can't even get the necessary drugs you need so you can stay alive. People can't get basic treatment. So we're going to spend trillions of dollars on medical procedures and technologies to implant things into people. It's ridiculous. And how good are these? How well will they work? And of course, like anything that seems to be high-techy, it costs a fortune. And now we're talking about adding in expensive operations and so forth. Who's going to pay for that, even if the technology was valid and it's not? We don't need to implant something. We can easily strap something on. You want better eyes? Well, we have things like that. They're called binoculars, and we could make them more user-friendly, where you could flip them on through a special glasses or other things. We also have all sorts of other things that could help us in similar fashions to bring that up. And, of course, for moving data, which is information of a fairly primitive kind or even a little advanced, we have computers. So we don't need to invade our body with toxins. So I don't know how many people understand that, but the bottom line is you can't put things in your body. It rejects it. You get someone else's heart. It's another human heart. It rejects it. You have to take medicines to stop that. So the bottom line is that putting devices in it is a fantasy perpetrated by stupid science to tell you, oh, we're getting someplace, man. We're going to be super, like the teachers told me in high school in the 70s, yeah, we're going to have so much time and leisure, and we're going to have flying cars, and we're going to be on all these planets. Nothing ever happened. It's a fantasy. People are working longer and harder for less now than they ever have. This is all the nonsense, and science is going to feed you garbage. They spent billions and billions of dollars, the EU did, on mind research that turned into nothing. because they don't know how the mind works and they're trying to somehow put the horse before the cart. We have to figure out human consciousness, how the mind works, what's going on. We don't even have an inkling of how, not even the basics. We have the usual nonsense, which you put in thousands of books describing the functioning of the mind, and it means nothing. Just like all the books on cancer. So what? The only book I want to know about cancer is how is it cured. I don't give a damn what it is. So the whole idea is that that's how the whole reality of things work that nobody wants to work on. So these are things that we have to fully understand and embrace here. But getting back to all this stuff, all of this is just further proof of the disconnection of average society. Now, as I've mentioned, most martial artists are very metaphysical. They're into all these energies. They understand there's something more and greater than just a punch, or at least most of them do. Some just think everything is just a punch and a kick. Well, that's really not what the energetic understanding of martial arts is, and the flow of the chakras, the flow of chi through your body. This is a whole different way of looking at empowerment and the functioning of the human body and consciousness. None of this is getting anywhere, and this is not exactly new, people. We had martial arts and kung fu philosophy in the late 60s and early 70s. Where is it today, where everybody's so enlightened, where we have a fairly large Asian population? Nothing. 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 So the whole bottom line is that this is really sad. And it's sad that people have to go and look for a guy that's been dead for 50 years like Bruce Lee to find fighting systems and philosophy in general. It's kind of sad that there isn't any martial arts people who've come forward and done anything. So it's a problem. And one of the problems that people don't understand with Asians, who I've had spent a lot of time with, particularly chi masters for different healings and other things, they don't speak any English well. They can't communicate well. They stay in their own communities. And someone else has to come in and write all the stuff for them and help them. But, these are the type of courses, and of course, none of these things really ever get off the ground. There doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in it. Ultimately, there's a lot of Asian Chi practitioners because it's part of their culture. I call it the baseball of Asia. Every American learns baseball. Every Asian learns about Chi in a lesser or greater degree. So the whole idea is we need to fully understand all of these things and have to ask why. And I think this is just one of those very acceptable areas which shows what a horrible place we're in. Now, occultism has always been labeled as evil and terrible, which is really unfair, but it has turned out to be that way because almost everybody in occultism is now based in Satanism or dark magic, etc. It's kind of sad. But the bottom line is that this has all been ignored. This is a way people could sneak in understandings of energies, philosophy, etc. And it was done with Kung Fu. And it was successful the way that the media put it out there. Yet it died and never really came back. And there's bits and pieces, and there's certainly, while there should be a consistent representation of this kind of information, philosophy, fun fighting, there's not. All we have is another CSI, another medical show, another law show as it used to be. It's the same old stuff over and over again, and there's nothing new. Now, part of this problem is Hollywood's problem, but there's also a lie there. Because when you go back and look at all these classic, interesting shows that were put out, they all failed. Green Hornet failed. Now, you can't say that's a great show, but certainly had martial arts in it. If everybody's into martial arts and loved Bruce Lee, that should have been a top-rated show. It didn't. It really didn't even last a season. It was canceled in its first year. And we go on and on with anything that comes out mystical. And Hollywood has put out, just as they did with the Bulletproof Monk, a fantastic movie that everybody ignored and ultimately pooed on. Until next time.